Welcome to TAM Talks, where we discuss the greatest challenges that museum leaders in Texas are facing. In this episode, I'm welcoming Charlie Walter, the director of the Mayborn Museum in Waco, and a TAM officer. Welcome, Charlie.
Hi, Alex. Great to be here.
Charlie, let's go ahead and get started. Can you let us know a little bit about how you got into museum work? It seems to be not a direct path in some cases.
Well, Alex, I started in the 5th grade. I took a museum class and I found this fossil. It was a class offered by the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History. I was in 5th grade. I just got hooked. And from there, I was fascinated by natural history museums. As a kid, I was inspired by the old National Geographic specials. I wanted to be one of the Craighead brothers following grizzlies through Yellowstone National Park. I went on to work for the Park Service for 2 seasons. I worked for the National Park Service. I did get to work in Yellowstone, and I was really about thinking about staying with the Park Service for a while, but I realized that's a very nomadic lifestyle. And when I went to college, I majored in wildlife biology, still had dreams of, being a field biologist. But at the time, most wildlife biologists, or most of the programs were going into DNA and lab work. A lot of stuff was happening in labs. I didn't want to be a lab person. So they had a minor in museums at Texas A&M, wildlife biology, minor in museums, just, loved it. I did volunteer work at the Brazos Valley Museum. And then through, it was one of those things, Alex. My wife had a friend who knew somebody who said, there's a friend I go to school with. They're looking for somebody to manage the visitor service department at the Science and History Museum in Fort Worth. I was working part-time on an MBA, and I was working in student activities actually at SMU at the time. But I applied, and I was hired as the first visitor service manager at the Science and History Museum. At the time, we were the only IMAX theater in the state of Texas, and it had doubled the attendance. It was chaotic. And one of the things was we had a whole staff that knew how to run an IMAX theater, but they didn't know a lot about museums either. So my job was to bridge that young staff that was running the IMAX and saying, we are part of a museum. What does that mean? What's that all about? So a lot of culture building and a lot of education work. So I had a wonderful 25-year career at Fort Worth Museum of Science and History, went on to be the director of the New Mexico Museum of Natural History and Science, came back to Texas, helped open the Museum in San Antonio, the Children's Museum. Thought I would be there for 10 years, but Baylor called me, and I came up here and saw, and again, one of the things I loved was Baylor has a natural history collection, and just really love what I saw here, and have been at Baylor now for 6 years.
6 years, well, great. Well, I know that you and I share a very deep passion about the outdoors and the natural world, and within helping to connect people to that interest. So very interesting path from the outdoors to the indoors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's talk about the indoors a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about the Mayborn Museum for those that aren't familiar?
Right. When I first came here, I said there's 3 things about the Mayborn that make it unique, and I realized later, no, there's 6. The Mayborn, number 1, is part of Baylor University, and being part of a university museum has a lot of special, gives you a lot of special opportunities. So that's 1. We're part of Baylor University. Number 2. The foundation of our museum is a 100-plus-year-old natural history museum that was known as the Strecker Museum for decades and decades and decades. Started off as the Baylor University Museum as they built a collection back in the 1890s. and then worked its way into a classic natural history museum. but then at some point, the community had a vision of creating a new museum, and merged the Strecker with a children's museum in town. It was called the Ali Mayborn Discovery Center, and said, let's merge these two and make them both stronger. So the Strecker Museum was merged with the Ali Mayborn Discovery Center. And then the new building was built and opened in 2004 on the banks of the Brazos River, where Baylor had a historic village. So those are three other things: our historic natural history museum, the merge of the children's museum, and then we have a historic village, an 1890s historic village on the site as well. So then two other things that make us unique: we have a museum studies program embedded in the Mayborn Museum. And all of you who go to the annual conference of the Texas Association of Museums know we bring a lot of Baylor graduate students every year. It's a great opportunity for them to meet all of you and to begin their professional network. So having that graduate program embedded in the museum is a perfect learning lab. So the graduate students have assistantships in different departments around the museum here, but also across Baylor, in archives and libraries and digitization work. And then the last thing is that this museum in the 70s discovered, with community support, these mammoths that were out here, and 6 miles from where I'm sitting is now Waco Mammoth National Monument. And this museum nurtured that site, excavated that site for decades. And then the leadership of the museum before I got here worked with the National Park Conservation Association and the city of Waco and the community. And we now have Waco Mammoth National Monument. And to this day, that collection of mammoths that have been excavated are here. We'll be the steward of that collection in perpetuity, but it will belong to the National Park Service as we build that relationship. So really a wonderful institution, and it's fascinating. It brings lots of my life together. I worked in student affairs. Well, I'm part of a campus now. I've worked for the National Park Service. We're now a partner in that. I love natural history. We have that. I've worked in children's museums. I've been on the board of the Association of Children's Museums. So I really did. This position has put a lot of my career together, and I just love being here and love being a part of it.
Yeah, what a perfect fit for between you and the Mayborn. Okay, great. Well, I know that throughout this series, we've been talking about some challenges that museums are facing. There's lots of change happening right now in the museum world, some of it due to the pandemics, civil unrest, a number of societal influences on the museum world right now. But from your point of view, from your seat, what kind of challenges is the Mayborn facing right now that you'd like to talk about today?
Right. Alex, I see one of our major challenges is just ongoing growth in this really challenging time. I personally believe if you're not growing, you're either stagnant or you're dead. And so I think growth is so important. And I'm thinking about it personally right now in two ways. I'm thinking about growth as far as professional development for my staff growth, ongoing professional development and learning. And then I'm thinking of institutional growth. The institutional growth here, we're on our second 3-year strategic plan since I've been here. And we, in the first phase, we identified an exhibit master plan for growth for our exhibits here. We've renovated about half of our children's museum in the first 5 years that I've been here. And we'll keep working on the children's museum side. But our whole natural history wing, we've identified a $14 million plan to make that happen. So part of this is growth for me. I am now a fundraiser, which is not something that I've been very naturally. And I have to give TAM credit for the fundraising conference 2 summers ago when we did that. I learned a lot that I'm putting into practice now. So just ongoing professional development for me, I have to now help raise $14 million to do this whole renovation and to assure that there's, one of the things I've learned is that you've got to have continual recapitalization renovation, if you want to put it that way, but you have to change the experience up constantly to keep your community engaged and involved. So that's part of that growth project. And we opened in 2004, and these exhibits have been here now for that 16, 17 years, and it's time for us to do a major renovation. So that'll keep me busy here between the next 5 and 10 years. Absolutely. The second part of that is just growth with your staff. You mentioned it perfectly. The world's changing, right? And it's changing faster every year. So how do you keep pace with that change? How do you keep yourself adapting and changing as an organization to meet the challenges of the day when those challenges are changing, and they're changing faster? So one of the things we've done here is everybody's job description here includes a line that says you will achieve at least 50 hours of professional development every year. So we require it. It's part of our job description. And really what that is, it's about continual learning. I'm a big believer that museums are learning organizations. They have to continually learn and adapt to their community. The heart of a learning organization is to be systemic in your approach to the world, and systemic means how are you connected and aligned as an organization to meet these needs. So it's a lot about strategic alignment and a lot about kind of a common, developing that common vision, common goal that everybody reaches towards. So those are the big challenges for me. It's growth, growth physically as an organization, and then constant growth and learning as a staff to meet the challenges of what's out there today and what we're all facing.
Great. Can you talk a little bit more about how you're addressing the challenges? You mentioned, TAM being a source of professional development in terms of helping you grow your organization institutionally. But what are some other kind of strategies that you're working with?
Right. Well, number one, we constantly work on our mission, vision, core values. That's the foundation of everything. And so we try to constantly keep those in front of us. When I teach here at Baylor, I teach museum administration. I use AAM's book of national standards. That's great. But even that book doesn't talk about values. And I think that's fundamental to any successful business, is to have a set of core values that your whole institution uses as a foundation of what you are and who you are. And we talk about ongoing learning, monthly staff meetings. We make sure to bring up a core value or to talk about core value. We have an annual staff retreat where we focus on our strategic plan and our core values. So it really is just creating an environment of ongoing learning, and then having a strategic plan that you all rally around, that you're connected and you're aligned around that strategic plan. We have 5 pillars. In this time, one of our pillars is how do we connect more strategically to our community and more directly to our community, the whole community. So we're doing things like doing workshops on co-creation around exhibits. How do we be better about co-creation? Well, we brought in Holly Truitt from University of Montana, who did some great work and is doing great work up there. And we're going to bring her to TAM, I know, this year to help our broader community. But yeah, how do we do a better job as co-creators of exhibits? How do we do a better job of making the entire community feel like this is their museum, give them voice in this museum? So we're working on things like that, and again, trying to set that culture of learning and making that a standard part of who we are as an institution.
Great. Yeah, that core values part is so critical, and being able to be agile as a museum, but also have a very really clear strategy.
Yeah.
Okay, just a couple more questions. In terms of, is there anything from the TAM community that those colleagues the other directors that you're speaking to through this video that might be able to help?
Well, Alex, I was thinking about that earlier, and really the idea of ongoing learning is really directly related to why we're involved with TAM. It's about the opportunities TAM provides us and our staff to learn new skills, but then just as importantly, to build new relationships. The people we meet at TAM are the people we build relationships with. And I think that's what'll keep, those two things will keep our institution strong. Part of being a learning organization is having a structure that's all about, it's called a network structure. It's a network organizational structure. It's realizing you can't put everything under one roof to be effective. You've got to have relationships outside, and you create win-win relationships with colleagues and institutions outside of your own, and you bring all that learning into your organization and all that knowledge in. So we very much are about visiting other museums, being in the hallways at TAM, whether they're virtual hallways or real hallways these days, to meet people and to constantly learn what we can from each other, and to bring all that learning into the institution. And because you have these networks and you're connected, as the world changes faster and faster, when there's something in your external environment, it's like a spider web. Out there, you get a little ping, and that ping is part of your network, part of your web. So as you network, you're more aware of these changes more quickly, and you're able to adapt and change to them more. So that's just one of the things for me personally has always been service to the field. But that service is all about, I'm learning from everybody I meet, and I'm building relationships, and I get to bring all those back home to my institution. So I think that's why TAM's so important to our community, because it allows that to happen in a big way. So I am constantly on the phone to our partners and our colleagues from TAM, learning about things and asking questions, and it's such a wonderful collaborative environment. It's helped us greatly here with all the different programs and things we're doing. So we will stay active, and again, I encourage anybody who sees this to be to really take service to the field as a core part of your profession, because again, that makes our whole field stronger. That's the primary reason, but I guarantee you, you'll build relationships and you'll learn things that'll just help you be more successful in your home organization.
That's great, Charlie. I'm glad that TAM is such an important part of helping connect the museum community in Texas. I mean, it's really a one of a kind type of organization because of the breadth of museums that we work with, not just history or science or art museums and others. Okay, let's wrap it up for today. Anything else that you'd like to share with us before we end our chat?
Yeah, I'll just say, everybody come to Waco in March of 2022 for the TAM annual conference. I'd love to meet you and tour you through the Mayborn Museum and show off Waco a little bit. So I do hope to see y'all here in Waco in March.
Yes, and that's going to be March 22nd through the 25th, 2021. I got a chance to do some site visits with Charlie and some of the other great museums and institutions that we're going to be hosting us at this hybrid event that's going to be a bit more decentralized, and we're going to spend more time in museums and cultural institutions and natural spaces. So that's going to be really exciting, and we're going to announce more of that as we get deeper into the fall. All right, well, thank you for your time today, Charlie. With that, I'd like to say goodbye on behalf of TAM, and thank you for serving in a leadership capacity on TAM as well as one of our officers.
Well, thank you, Alex. I appreciate it. And thanks for everything you do for the museum community too. We appreciate it. We appreciate you.
Thank you. All right, goodbye.
Take care.